Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Mockaitis.
Hello, and thanks for joining us here for episode 736 with Amy Herman. Amy has some pro tips on problem solving with some fresh perspectives taken from art. Not the most problem-solving of places, and yet she brings some goods. You'll learn 1, what to do when you don't know what to do. 2, 3 simple steps for smarter problem solving. And 3, the top 2 do's and don'ts of problem solving. So if you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP736. And if you're at awesomeatyourjob.com, check out some of our goodies like the Gold Nugget Summary emails, the full text searchable transcripts, the course for 10 days to winning at work to slash waste out of your work week and get home earlier or do more fun, cool stuff. Goodies over at awesomeatyourjob.com. And here's some goodies about Amy. Amy Herman is the founder and president of The Art of Perception, Inc., a New York-based organization that conducts professional development courses for leaders around the world, from Secret Service agents to prison wardens. Herman was the head of education at the Frick Collection for over 10 years. She's an art historian and an attorney, and Amy holds a BA in International Affairs from Lafayette College, a JD from the National Law Center, and an MA in Art History from Hunter College. Amy is a world-renowned speaker, and she's been featured on CBS Evening News, the BBC, and in countless print publications, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and many others. Big thanks to Amy for sharing her wisdom with us, and big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Storyworth. Whenever I'm thinking about meaningful Father's Day gifts, Storyworth leaps to mind. Storyworth helps you preserve precious memories and stories from your father for years to come. Each week, Storyworth emails your loved ones a thought-provoking question that you get to help pick, such as, what's the bravest thing you've ever done? I personally love the prompt so much that I have refreshed Storyworth's questions page many times looking for more. Storyworth makes the writing process super quick and easy. All your loved one needs to do is respond to that email with a story, and then you get a quick copy of that. And after a year of this fun, Storyworth compiles your loved one's stories and photos into a beautiful keepsake hardcover book that you'll be able to share and revisit for generations to come. Families love Storyworth so much, they've got 25,000 5-star reviews on Trustpilot and have millions of stories preserved. So give all the fathers in your life a unique, heartfelt gift they'll all cherish for years. Storyworth. Right now, you can save $10 on your first purchase when you go to storyworth.com/awesome. That's storyworth.com/awesome to save $10 on your first purchase. And big thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for your future. You don't need a lot of money or expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. Acorns recommends an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, then automatically invests your money for you. NerdWallet.com, whom I love on these sorts of matters, gives Acorns a whopping 4.7 stars and says, quote, if you want to make the most of your spare change, there's no better place to do that than Acorns. Head to acorns.com/awesome or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. And we got a legal disclaimer here. It may not be representative of all clients. Tier 1 compensation provided. Compensation provides an incentive to positively promote Acorns. View important disclosures at acorns.com/awesome. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Please consider your objectives, risk tolerance, and Acorns' fees before investing. Acorns Advisors LLC, Acorns, is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are provided to clients of Acorns by Acorns Securities LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. For more information, visit acorns.com. One sponsor to check out is Harvard Business Review. This brilliant magazine, published at hbr.org, is the leading destination for smart management thinking. Fun fact, HBR has been mentioned in 108 episodes of the show. That's because HBR has great stuff that comes up often. They've got explainer videos, podcasts, real-world case studies, and much more. I think of HBR each night that I put on my special orange glasses. Their article, Will Blue Light Glasses Improve Your Sleep?, revealed that those who wore them reported better sleep and a 7% improvement in work performance as compared to those who wore the sham glasses. So I cite HBR anytime anyone tells me that I look silly wearing them. Now, much of HBR's content is available for free when you sign up at their site. Subscriptions that get you unlimited content cost $10 a month. If you visit hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME, you can save 10% off of that subscription. Again, to save 10% off of your HBR subscription, go to www.hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME. Now, here's Amy. Amy, welcome to How to Be Awesome at Your Job.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to get your perspectives on art and problem solving and more. Could we start with maybe hearing what's been one of the most influential pieces of art in your life? Like, what is a piece that has stuck with you and made an impact? And tell us that story.
Well, that changes almost every day because every time I see a work of art that takes my breath away, I think, oh, that's it. That's life-changing. And luckily for me, that happens quite often. But the work of art that really got me thinking so much about this book and about the work that I do is a painting from 1819 by Géricault, and it's called The Raft of the Medusa. And the reason I talk about this work so much, it's really a horrific painting. It shows the worst of humanity, but just the tiniest bit of hope. And it's a huge painting. It's 23 feet by 16 feet. It takes up a whole wall at the Louvre.
Hot dog.
And it shows the absolute worst that can result from incompetence and from power. And yet there is the slightest bit of hope in retelling the story of how the painting came to be and how these people survived really has been inspirational, and I've been able to apply it in so many different situations. So I've been thinking a lot, and I opened my new book with The Raft of the Medusa, and I close with it as well. So I think a lot about that work of art.
Well, we'll certainly link to an image of that for the visual side of things in a podcast interview. And the sliver of hope, so there's the story. I will... In reading your introduction, I gazed upon it. I confess, well, in a much smaller amount of real estate,
than the Louvre offers.
And maybe only for about 20 seconds, which I imagine you would say is not nearly enough to take in the depths. But I was just like, oh man, that's a real cluster.
That's exactly what it is.
So, is there hope depicted in that image that I overlooked?
Believe it or not, and you're not alone in overlooking the hope, because very, very faintly on the horizon line, if you really, really squint your eyes, the rescue ship can be seen.
Ah.
Yes, the rescue ship is there. And what I love is the painting also does away with discrimination, and there is a black man at the top of the pyramid who's flagging down the rescue ship. And that was a real scandal back in the 19th century. To have a black man was the one who rescued everybody because he was the one who was able to flag down the ship. But the ship is not apparent. Don't feel bad for not seeing it. It's so small and it's on the horizon. And it reminds us all that, sometimes hope is just out of our grasp and we have to look a little bit harder and really try to find it. And it really is within our grasp. And that's what I hope that readers of the book will be able to understand and be able to apply to their own lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like that. Hope may be just beyond my immediately obvious perception, just as it was in that image. And I'll chew on that. Thank you. Well, let's talk about problem solving here. You've spent a lot of time thinking about this, training people in this, learning and researching on this. Can you share maybe one of the most strikingly, maybe surprising, fascinating, counterintuitive discoveries you've made about problem solving over the course of your career?
I have. And I'd love to share one of the things because it's almost counterintuitive. But I'm going to start by telling you about a process in Japan when ceramicists and potters, when they make bowls and vases and cups, it's inevitable that some of those vases and cups are going to come out broken or asymmetrical or imperfect. And instead of throwing that flawed pottery away, what these Japanese ceramicists do is they fill the cracks in with gold and silver and platinum lacquer. And the process is called kintsugi. And it means to repair with gold, to fill in the cracks with gold. And what happens to each of those objects is they become more precious and more valuable than had they been perfect in the first place. And what I take away from the process of kintsugi is none of the people that I work with are potters or ceramicists, but I ask them the question, how are you practicing kintsugi? How are you fixing what's broken with resources that you already have? And the beautiful thing about kintsugi is it honors the struggle. It brings the mistakes to the fore. So rather than walking away from our mistakes and saying, I'm going to do better next time and I'm going to make it perfect, we're not striving for perfection. I want to bring our mistakes to the fore. So not only can we honor the struggle that we went through to solve a problem, but others can see our mistakes and see how we got there. Because I hate to break it to you, nobody's perfect and there is no perfect solution. So the idea of kintsugi, it's such a beautiful concept, and it allows us to make our mistakes and to honor those mistakes in trying to fix them.
Beautiful. Thank you. So kintsugi really is a beautiful visual representation of that very process, that notion of we have some mistakes and we're going to fill them in and make it all the more useful in terms of maybe sharing the mistakes and lessons learned with others so that wisdom can proliferate. That's really cool. Can you share a cool example of this in practice?
Absolutely. In the field of medicine, doctors sometimes this takes place in hospitals all across the country. And sometimes it's done weekly, sometimes it's done every 2 weeks or every month. Doctors go behind closed doors and they have something called M&M. And M&M stands for morbidity and mortality, kind of a downer of a title. But what they do is they go around the table and they talk about what went wrong. Who misread the MRI? Who got the wrong prescription? Who died? And what went wrong. And by sharing all their mistakes, not only does it alleviate the guilt of the individual person and recognize that we all make mistakes, but also we can learn from each other's mistakes because we're human and things will go wrong. And so just the idea of M&M, that doctors are willing to go behind the door and talk about what went wrong. I wish we had M&M in every profession, the way kintsugi enables us to visualize what went wrong and actually honor that struggle. Medicine says, okay, you know what? We're not perfect. Things go wrong. Lives are lost. We gave the wrong medicines. Let's all learn from it collectively and keep moving.
Well, that is a powerful example because that's about as high stakes as it gets. Lives were lost because of a mistake I made. And that happens in law enforcement and military and many of your clients and medicine, certainly. And I was just thinking, one of my first thoughts was, well, this litigious age, it's like behind closed doors is right.
I can give you one more example that's not so high stakes.
Well, I guess maybe first with that practice, which indeed I agree with you, there are many other fields where that could be applied excellently. I'm curious, how do folks get past some of the hangups associated with like the vulnerability and trying to cover your rear end and liability? I think like we've had Amy Edmondson on talking about psychological safety and other guests, and that's often hard to get to. But as you described it, it sounds like this is just par for the course in most hospital environments.
You know, it's a recognition of the fact that we are all human. One of the things that I talk about across the professional spectrum is that when you are missing a critical piece of information, and it can happen whether you are a postal worker, a prison warden, a beekeeper, a doctor, or a Navy SEAL, you're missing a piece of information. And in the intelligence world, they call it an intel gap. And I tell all of the people that I work with that no matter how big the intel gap is, you have one more source of information that you can rely on. You can default to your humanity. And if you default, because before we're doctors and patients and lawyers and clients and police officers and suspects, we are all human. And if you don't know what to do next because of an intel gap, ask yourself and say, you know what? If I was this guy's father or uncle or friend, what would I do? And default to your humanity. And you have this whole rich source of information that you can really rely on. And very rarely will it let you down.
Yeah, that's really beautiful because in those instances, humanity that really strikes, it kind of automatically stirs up sort of virtuous stuff like humility, like compassion, like, hey, man, we don't quite know what's going on here, but you know what? If it were my kid, I'd want to test X, Y, and Z. So what do you say? And you keep it moving.
That's exactly right. And you know, it's so interesting. Sometimes it comes down to the smallest of human interactions. I had a group of Army officers on the ground in a foreign country, and it was a hostile country, but they were at the local village and they were looking for help in the local village. And none of the women would talk to the Army officers. And, you know, they weren't forceful and they defaulted to their humanity. And finally, one of them asked in the other language, why are you not speaking with us? And you know what it was? It was because the Army officers were wearing reflective sunglasses, and women in this village can't make eye contact with men. And if they didn't know if they were making eye contact or not, they wouldn't talk to them. So it all came down to sunglasses. But I find what's universal is sometimes we have to ask hard questions. Why isn't this working? Why can't I fix this? to find the solution?
Yeah, you're right. It is a hard question in that there is, again, some vulnerability in terms of, well, you smell, you've been very rude to us. You were involved in an accident that harmed a family member of mine, a couple of weeks ago. It is a hard question. Like, why aren't you talking to us? And yeah, that could surface some surprisingly simple solutions. Okay, sure. Taking off glasses can do. Awesome. Well, so we've already gone deep into kintsugi. Can you tell us then, your book, Fixed: How to Perfect the Fine Art of Problem Solving, what's sort of the main idea or thesis here?
The main idea of the book is to take the artist's creative process, how artists create works of art, and use that as a template to solve problems from minor annoyances to intractable dilemmas. Let's face it, everything is broken right now. Everything. And when I started writing this book, we weren't even under the crunch of pandemic. I had no idea what we were going to be facing. And in so many cases, solutions from the past, yesterday's solutions are not going to solve tomorrow's problems. And so I wanted to create this template that everybody could use, regardless of their profession, regardless of their educational level. How can we make problems more approachable? And what's a template everybody can solve? And I use the artist's process to create a work of art. Because I'm a lawyer and an art historian, I like to think I have a logical mind, but I also wanted to tap into the creative process. So I broke the book down into 3 sections, 3 really easy sections: prep, draft, and exhibit. How do we prep the problem? How do we draft our solutions? And how do we bring them into the world? And each of those sections is broken down into subsections, but it all goes back to prep, draft, and exhibit. And I wanted the process to be simple. We all have enough on our plates. I don't need to give people fancy acronyms and things to remember. Oh, Amy said in her book, we have to do A, B, C, and D. Nobody has time for that. How can we break problems into digestible pieces? And how can we not be afraid to engage in conversation the way artists for millennia have been creating works of art? This is not the time to fool with that success. Let's leverage it. Let's use that approach to try to solve our own problems.
Mm-hmm. Well, intriguing. So that's fun. And a lot of your clients are, I don't know what the word is, hardcore.
That's a good way to put it. They're hardcore.
I don't know, Secret Service, NATO, FBI, Interpol. It's like, in terms of not having time, I imagine their patience for quote unquote out there or frilly or soft tools, might be limited. If I'm purely speculating, you can confirm or deny.
You're speculating correctly.
So given that, I'm curious, could you maybe walk us through an example of, we'll just call him a hardcore client, applying some of this prep, draft, exhibit, problem-solving process used from the artistic approach to solve something?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you about one of my favorite clients. One of my favorite clients is the NBA, National Basketball Association. And they brought me to Las Vegas, and I was going to lead a session of my program for about 250 heads of security for the NBA. Picture these guys. They're the ones on the court. They've got an earpiece in their ear. They're dressed in a suit. They're watching the players, the GM, the audience. They're making sure everybody is safe. There's no violence, and that game is going to go forward. Can you picture the scene?
Mm-hmm, sure.
So the woman who introduces me gets up on the stage and she reads from a piece of paper and says, Amy Herman's here from New York, and she's going to teach us how to look at works of art so you can do your job more effectively. Every head went down to their phone. That was like the trigger to go start scrolling on your phone. So I get up on the stage and I say, you know what? We're going to have an instant replay. You're going to be looking at art for the next 2 hours. I'm in charge, and you're going to leave here thinking about your job differently than you came in. And I broke them into pairs, and I said, one of you close your eyes, one of you keep your eyes open. And I put a work of art up, and they had 45 seconds to describe it to their partner so that they could get the best visual image of what it was they were looking at. They had to look at a work of art. They had to decide. They had to prep. What am I going to say? Then they had to run it through their mind, and then they had to exhibit. They had to tell their partner the best possible version of something they had never seen before. And for the next 2 hours, flew. Because I brought them new data. I brought them works of art. Nobody trains the NBA to look at works of art to think about how they do their job. But to think about the creative process, every single basketball game, no 2 games are ever the same. No 2 teams are the same. No 2 security concerns are the same. No 2 cities are the same. And the game always changes from painting to painting to painting. And how do you assess that work of art you're looking at? How do you redraft it in your head? And how do you articulate it on that little microphone in your ear? Because the safety and the success of that game is in your hands. And at the end of the session, I said to them, the NBA brought a copy of my book for each of you. Before you go to your cocktail party, I'll be at the back signing your books. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be all alone back there. Every single one of them stopped to sign a book. And there were hugs all around because so many of them were NYPD officers from back home. And it made me realize, doesn't matter what you do, whether you're on the basketball court or you are in hostile territory or you are the night nurse, you're going to face problems that are unforeseen. And I want to be able to help you solve them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's intriguing because at first you might say, I don't see the connection at all between looking at art and security. But then this is, oh, yes, sure enough, very often in that job, you look at something and you have to describe that something well to collaborators, or you might have a bit of a stickier situation if you did not describe it as well in terms of misunderstandings and over or under reactions and all that sort of thing.
If I can bring in a quote that applies to everybody, and it's a quote from the 19th century from Henry James, but it's a quote that I give to every single one of my sessions. And I say, try to be that person on whom nothing is lost.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Try to be the person on whom nothing is lost. So when you look at a work of art, I want you to tell me not only what you see, but what are you missing?
Say more about that. Tell you not only what I see, but what's missing, like what I am missing from the art?
Not only what you're missing, what you expected to be there, assumptions you had that aren't there. This is a concept that I stole from emergency medicine. It's called the pertinent negative. It means articulating what's not there in addition to what is there to actually give a more accurate picture of what you're looking at. So here's the example. If a patient comes into the emergency room, and let's say the attending physician thinks the patient has pneumonia. Pneumonia has 3 symptoms. Symptom 1 is present, symptom 2 is present. But if symptom 3 is absent, it's the pertinent negative. You need to say that it's not there because then you know it's not pneumonia. So when you arrive at a crime scene and you hear on the radio all the details, well, you expected there to be blood. Well, there's not blood everywhere. You need to say there isn't blood everywhere. It's not just that I see disarray and I see shell casings. There is no blood. Because when you say what you see, you're only giving half the picture. So art gives us this perfect vehicle. Well, I noticed all these blues and yellows and trees in the picture, but I noticed there were no humans in the picture. There was no sunshine in the picture. We're actually getting to the other side of the issue to tell people not only what we see, but what we don't see. The pertinent negative is a really powerful tool.
Well, that is handy. I guess I'm thinking about all sorts of conversations, in terms of, we had a guest who talked about not just being provided an explanation, but are you being provided evidence? And there's quite a difference. It's like
absolutely,
and so often we make do with an explanation, like, oh, okay, I guess that makes some sense, so I can move along. Versus if you really got your antenna up and you're thinking critically and alertly, you can say, okay, so that might be a plausible story, but do we have any evidence that is in fact, what did occur? That'd be great to see. Or in a conversation in terms of maybe what I didn't hear was an apology.
That's exactly right.
What I didn't hear was a commitment to do something differently. And so that's a cool tool, the pertinent negative from ER folk. If I could, I will say, have you borrowed some nifty things from law enforcement that in terms of a ready to go tool like that you could share?
I have. Actually, I have 2 tools that I wanted to share.
Let's do it.
One of them, just to build on the pertinent negative, is in warfare, in modern warfare. In World War II.
Not the video game.
Nope, not the video
modern
game.
Warfare, yeah.
I didn't even know there was such a thing, so I'm learning
Call
from
of Duty,
you.
Modern Warfare, of course.
No, my son would know that. In World War II, the Royal Air Force sent their planes out, their fighter planes out, and they suffered heavily at the hands of German anti-aircraft fire. And when the planes came back, the Royal Air Force didn't have enough armor to reinforce the whole plane before they sent them out again to fight. So the decision was made by the Royal Air Force, let's just fix the planes where they were damaged. But it was a mathematician, a single mathematician, who was dissenting and said, you're looking at this the wrong way. He said, you need to look at these planes to see where they weren't damaged. And that's where you need to reinforce them, because the planes that were damaged in those areas didn't come back.
Zing. Yeah.
See how the pertinent negative works. So you get on the other side of the issue. And just today, I was talking with one of my colleagues in the NYPD, and we were talking about different applications of the program. And he said, one of the things that you taught us is that when we get to the crime scene, we hear about the crime scene, we hear it on the radio, we get there, we know what we're expecting. Not only do we have to overcome confirmation bias, thinking, been there, done that, I know what I'm going to find. But you've instilled in us that we need to go back, retrace our steps, and walk into the crime scene again to notice what we didn't see the first time. What's on the staircase? What's on the landing? What's in the garbage can? He said, how many times have I found a weapon that's been thrown outside the crime scene and is never within the confines of where we're looking?
So the retracing the steps, I mean, I'm thinking, how does that work mentally? So, okay, I go to the crime scene once, I take a good look around, and then I just pretend that I didn't do that, or what do we think?
I put the whole thing in reverse and I enter again, because your eyes, you're already planning on what you're going to see. And what confirmation bias is you have an idea in your head of what you're going to see, and your brain will seek out those things to confirm what's already in your brain. But when you make it a practice to say, okay, I'm here, I'm going to step out and walk again and try to notice what I didn't see before. So one of the assignments that I give to my classes, if I see them over a course of 2 days, their assignment is when they leave to come back and tell me something that they noticed that night on the way home that they wouldn't have seen before. And it forces you to look outside of your comfort zone, because we're all trying to get from point A to point B, and we forget that there are points C through Z out there.
That's funny. When I think about that challenge, notice something you haven't noticed before. I guess I'm thinking in a professional career context, like a document. You want a spreadsheet or a report or a bunch of words to be free of errors and really compelling, persuasive, well researched and all that good stuff. And so, it's tricky when you're reviewing your own writing in terms of being like kind of catching the stuff. But then when you put that challenge in there, in terms of notice what you haven't noticed before. In a way, it sort of puts your brain in a funky little loop. It's like, well, how am I supposed to do that? I didn't notice it before. I'm going to notice it. And so, but then it's just like, look specifically for that which you haven't looked for. I guess my mind's thinking, well, the first thing you might notice might be somewhat inconsequential. Like, I'm using this font is actually mismatched in some places. Okay, quick fix, doesn't matter a lot, but a little more consistency, professionalism. And then you might notice any number of things, like I'm using the word indeed a lot. That might be kind of annoying. Or if you say, hey, if I'm looking to notice something that I haven't noticed before, maybe I needed to get a fresh lens on this, maybe get some AI tools to look at my writing and tell me some things like, oh, hot dog. I actually am kind of impressed with what those can do right now.
And think about how effective this can be in problem solving. You do the same thing over and over again. You say, well, how are we going to get out of this rut? And you say to yourself, all right, I'm going to look for something that I haven't seen before that's intrinsic to this problem. What happens before the problem occurs? What happens immediately after? And if you make it a practice to look for things that you didn't see before, you'd be amazed what drops into your lap. And you know what? This all calls upon another concept that I learned from one of my colleagues at the FBI, and I use it every single day. It's a Latin phrase, festina lente. Festina lente. It means to make haste slowly. We all have deadlines. We all need to get to the finish line. But if you don't make that haste purposefully and slowly and look around, you're going to have to start all over again. And, it brings me back to one of my favorite books, called The Boys in the Boat by Daniel James Brown. It's a book from 2013, and it's about the 8-oared boat from the University of Washington that won the gold at the 1936 Olympics. They beat Hitler's boat. I mean, it was really quite the upset. It's a great book. It's about our strengths and weaknesses and that we're all part of a team. The boat is just as good as its weakest rower. But the reason I bring in Festina Lente is what could be a better example of having to row. Of course, you want to row quickly. You want to win the race. But if you're not in sync with all the other rowers and you're not communicating with them, you're going to lose. And so it means taking the time to communicate about how quickly you're going so that you can make haste slowly.
Very cool. Lovely. Okay. Well, so we talked about the prep draft exhibit. Could you maybe walk us through, in terms of step by step, how do I apply this process when I'm trying to solve a problem?
Absolutely. There are some steps within each of those, and the table of contents is broken down. And I'm going to give you one section from each of them that I think is most important. And it's going to sound blatantly obvious, but under prep, you need to define the problem. You need to say out loud, because if you assume that everybody knows what the problem is, you're all gathered. How many times have you been at a meeting and everybody says, okay, we're here to discuss X? How come we never say what X is? We need to go around the table and ask, what is everybody's perception of the problem to make sure we're all starting on the same page? That's part of the prep. And part of the draft, I think the two most important parts of draft are breaking the problem into bite-sized pieces. You know, when little kids, toddlers are learning to eat, you cut their food up into small pieces. Well, at some point, they have to learn to eat themselves. We need to break it into bite-sized pieces so that we can digest the problem. And then we need to set deadlines. There's this negative association with a deadline. It's not such a bad thing. It forces us to be creative. It forces us to find a solution. And finally, under exhibit, the two most important things are to manage contradictions. We're going to find contradictions all the time. Can't be fixed, can't do it, this doesn't match. Manage those contradictions, articulate them. And the second one is what I started this discussion with, was kintsugi, repairing your mistakes with gold, because there are going to be mistakes the whole way. But I think it's so important to incorporate those mistakes into your solution, because you're going to have to solve problems over and over and over again. And recognizing the mistakes and honoring those struggles is a great way to start to get to the solution. So within prep, draft, and exhibit, there are bite-sized pieces that you can take. And I really believe, working across the professional spectrum, almost any problem can be solved this way.
Okay, well, let's grab one. Let's grab a problem and sort of move step by step here.
Sure. So let's think about, I worked with a group of nurses in the hospital after there was a shooting at a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I had a session with the shock and trauma nurses. And one of the reasons I love working with them, there's no mincing of words. They are negotiating on the front lines. They are processing the trauma that's coming through the doors. They're dealing with family members. They're dealing with medical personnel. And there is no time. You can't mince words. Every word matters. And one of them said to me, she raised her hand and she said, you know, the night of that shooting, we ran out of gurneys, Amy. We ran out of gurneys and we had to put patients over our shoulders to bring them into the emergency room. And she said, I lost it as a human being. She said, we were out of resources and I couldn't articulate anymore. And I said, well, what did you do then? She said, I had to pull it together because I can't be an effective nurse until I can communicate not just with my colleagues, but with colleagues, patients, and families. And so without that communication, we just have to learn to pull it together. And of course, not everybody is in a shock and trauma setting. We don't work on, as you said before, so many of the people I work with are in life and death situations. Most of us don't work in those situations. But it's still so important to regroup and to say, okay, what's the immediate problem here? She lost it as a human being. She couldn't communicate. And if you can't communicate and you're on the shock and trauma ward, you need to fix that problem immediately. But yet, another shock and trauma nurse who doesn't have the same reaction is going to be dealing with families, and they're going to see people in panic mode. And so they're going to have different perceptions of the problem and how they're going to solve the problem. So articulating, you do A, I'm going to do B, and you do C. Sometimes there are time constraints. Sometimes there aren't. But we have many, many different facets to deal with. And again, this book is not about art. It's using art as the template that different people can use in a whole host of scenarios to prep, draft, and exhibit to solve their problem.
Okay, thank you. And could you share with us maybe one more top do and top don't when it comes to problem solving and how art can help us?
Sure. So the first top do is to recognize that you need to say what you see before you say what you think. People confuse them all the time. Okay. So when we're looking at a work of art, people will say, well, I don't like that, or I hate modern art. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, what do you see? And so to think about the firm line of delineation between saying what you see and saying what you think is very, very important, but you need to lay the groundwork first. And I would say the top don't speak without thinking. Do the prep and draft in your head before you send an email, before you press send, before you pick up the phone, or so many of my clients are on the radio. Think before you speak. And I will say this, communication is a two-way street. It's not just what you have to say, it's how it's being heard. To whom are you speaking, and who is listening to you? And the prep and the draft and the exhibit are all tailored and according to whom you are working with and to whom are you communicating. Think before you speak. The top don't is don't speak without thinking, and the top do is say what you see before you say what you think.
All right. Thank you. Well, now, Amy, could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
I'm going to repeat the quote that I said before about Henry James at the risk of saying it twice, because it is so fundamental to me, to my work, and the way I try to live my life. From walking to the corner to go get a quart of milk to helping someone in distress. It's what Henry James said, try to be the person on whom nothing is lost. And just in parentheses, that also enhances your own engagement in the world. Nothing is lost on you. You can engage with the people and the places and appreciate so much more where you are by trying to be that person on whom nothing is lost.
All right. And could you share a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
Yeah, a bit of research that was just mind-boggling to me was a study done in 2009 in Jerusalem, and it was a study of radiologists. And what they did is they showed a group of radiologists MRIs and X-rays and scans. But for a control group, they also showed a photograph of the patient. So it wasn't just the X-ray of the lungs or the ribs or the hips. There was also an actual photograph of the person. And for those radiologists who had the photograph of the person, they found 80% more findings. Their reports were more in-depth, and they also found ancillary findings. And when they asked the physicians what could account for this 80% difference, they said, it took no extra time to have a picture of the patient next to a picture of the lung, and it gave us a broader picture of the whole person. And I think about that study because sometimes we just see a cross-section of a person. We have an email, we have an X-ray, we have an MRI. And by thinking of that X-ray as in a whole person, it's going to broaden your own view of them and help them solve their problems.
Oh, cool. And how about a favorite book?
My favorite book, again, to repeat what I talked about before, The Boys in the Boat by Daniel James Brown from 2013. It's about individuals and teamwork and just cheering on the underdog. I'm a huge champion of the underdog.
And a favorite tool, something you use to be awesome at your job?
When I'm completely overwhelmed and my brain is foggy, I sit back and because of the pandemic, I go to a museum online and I look at works of art, some that I know and some that I don't, and I just take a deep breath. And it allows my eyes to relax and it allows my brain to simmer down and remind me to see things with refreshed eyes whenever possible.
Mm-hmm. And is there a key nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with your clients? They quote it back to you often?
Think about what you're not seeing, that pertinent negative. More often than not, when I ask what's the key takeaway from the art of perception, people say to think about what I'm not seeing and to know that it's right in front of me and to really gear our vision and our looking and our sense of critical inquiry to think about not just what we see, but what we don't see.
All right. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
I would point them to my website, artfulperception.com. And my books are at artfulbooks.com. And I am on social media at Amy Herman, AOP, as in art, O of P, perception.
And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Every day that you go to work or you sit down at your desk, prepare to have your eyes opened when you don't even realize that they're closed. Every day, I want you to end the day having your eyes opened in a way that you didn't even know they were closed. And it can be the smallest thing that you noticed, just what we talked about, what you didn't see before, but know that your eyes are closed and make the effort to open them. And use art to do that when you can.
All right, Amy, thank you. This has been a treat, and I wish you much luck and fun in all your problem solving.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I really loved Amy's perspective about the pertinent negative, not just what you see, but what you don't see, which might be very helpful. And I think it's surprisingly easy when I ask myself, what am I not seeing? What have I not looked at? What have I not asked? But part of me wondered, like, is that really going to work? It's like, well, if I didn't see it, if I didn't ask it, it's because I can't think of it. And yet, when I prompt myself, well, what haven't I asked or what haven't I seen? It really does prompt me to look in different ways and get some more good stuff. So thanks to Amy for that. Again, the show notes, the transcript, and the links to items we've referenced are at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP736. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full-text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.